Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey with the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China, and I've got a question about skipping rope. I was asked, is that good for fight training? Is it good for boxers, or is it just a waste of time? Okay. Now, if you see my video on punching with weights, a lot of people got angry with that. It got way more dislikes than likes because I said punching with weights is stupid. Now, I've got mixed feelings about skipping rope. Because I'll be really honest with you, skipping rope by itself, just like any other single activity, is not going to make you a good boxer, but it certainly won't make your boxing worse. Okay? Now, I had a boxing coach back in the day, and he would insist that I skip rope for 30 minutes before he would show me anything, before I put on the gloves, before I touched the focus mitts or hit the bags or did any drills or sparring or whatever. I had to skip rope for 30 minutes before I could even get his attention. Okay, and I think that was good for me, and that was necessary at the time. Okay, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but at the same time I want you to understand that there are some mixed feelings about this in the combat sports community. For example, if you ask Faraz Zahabi, he calls it junk training. And I think that's a great video. Watch his video on junk training, Faraz Zahabi with the TriStar Gym, and he gives some really interesting reasons why. And I absolutely agree with his reasons. Okay? Because if we are skipping rope instead of doing something else that would be a better use of our time, that's junk training. But I do recommend that some of my fighters, some of the students that I train, that they do skip rope. And here's why. Because some of them actually need it. Not everybody does, or at least not on the same level. Not everybody needs to skip rope for 30 minutes before they train. Okay? But if you see a flat-footed fighter, that means they're on the soles of their feet. Hold on. I'm gonna film my feet here. Okay. Flat-footed fighter, plodding along, yeah, on the soles of their feet there. I'll always ask them to skip rope for a very simple reason. It gets them up on the balls of the feet. Gets them moving like a boxer. Okay? Up there, you're agile. You can move there quickly, right? We can punch properly right there. But if we're flat on our feet, it doesn't happen that way. So anytime I see a flat-footed fighter, I recommend that they skip rope. If I notice they're just plodding along and letting those heels settle into the floor, I'll recommend that they skip rope. Okay, because that is a good way to get that bounce into the muscle memory. Okay, so junk training, as Mr. Zahabi defines it, you know, I think anything can become junk training. For example, I see a lot of people who become addicts of the heavy bag, and the heavy bag is a great tool. It's important, we should use that, but it's not the only tool, and we definitely shouldn't use it at the expense of becoming a better fighter. You know, even sparring can become junk training. I've seen a few guys who, you know, all they do is spar, and their technique sucks, and their technique never gets any better because they never drill the technique. They never drill their weak positions. All they do is spar and get knocked around a little bit. So they get really good at getting in the ring and getting knocked around a little bit, but not winning fights. Okay? So we have to be very careful to ensure that our training is not junk training. So if you love skipping rope, keep doing it. It's good for you. It is good exercise. You know, it's a great hand-eye coordination thing. I personally, I hate skipping rope. I hate it. I'm not very good at it. But at the same time, I think it's very important to do the things that make us uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, at least once a day in your training session, push yourself into something that you don't like to do. For some fighters, that's running. You know, I don't run. It's not part of my regimen because it's really hard on your joints, especially when you get older. Now, I'm pushing 40 here. Okay? And if I run for more than 10 minutes, man, my hips start grinding into each other, my knees start screaming at me, I'm like, oh man. And I used to train for marathons with my older brother. We used to run forever. Can't physically do that anymore. Now, I don't think you have to be able to run a lot to be a good fighter, because the type of conditioning for fighting is very different than the type of conditioning for running. But if you like running, do it. I mean, it's not bad for you. It won't make you a worse fighter by any stretch of the imagination. But it's very important to remember that the big limitation, the one big limiting factor in martial arts, especially mixed martial arts, where we have to master a wide variety of combat ranges and skill sets, is time. Our big limiting factor is time, right? So if I have, say, 2 hours a day to train, and maybe you have all the time in the day, maybe you're a full-time fighter, but most of us are not. You know, I worked 3 jobs when I was fighting professionally for most of my career when I lived in the US. 3 jobs on top of my training. So again, my training time was precious. So when you have a limited amount of training time, like 2 hours for example, you got to be really smart about the way you use that. So are you going to skip rope for 30 minutes of that 2 hours? Well, if you need to, I mean, if you got the flat-footed issue, maybe that might be a good use of your time for some of those training sessions. But all of them indefinitely, probably not. Okay? So what if, say for example, your wrestling is suffering and you really want to develop a good double leg takedown? Skipping rope for 30 minutes, in that case, that's junk training. That's not going to help you shoot for those doubles. What is? Shoot 100 doubles. Shoot 100 more. All right, drill and drill and drill it to death. That technique you want to master. That's going to be a good use of your time if that's the case, right? Or maybe your kicking is suffering, right? Maybe you're just not flexible enough to throw that high kick. So what do? Skipping rope for 30 minutes when you have 2 hours to train? No, practice your flexibility, you know, stretch, do some dynamic kicking stretches, you know, and get to the point where you can actually get that leg up there. In other words, do what you need to do with the time that you have. Right? So again, skipping rope, it's a great exercise. I personally hate doing it. It's good some of the time for some of the people, but all of the time for all of the people, yeah, we have to be careful that we are not junk training. Hey, thank you for the question. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below or email me at ramseydewey@gmail.com. Thank you for watching. Now, get out there and train.